She never actually says, DeSantis says it, and I'm surprised at that because that's part of our proud history as Republicans, the fight against slavery and struggle.
Can I just say something, though? I mean, we talk about this as if it is the past. We've covered stories where people have died, have been killed because of racism. Jacksonville, Florida, the Dollar Tree shooting. I mean, this is happening right now. And this is not just the Black community, right? The Japanese internment. I mean, those families and descendants are still here. My last name is Alford, not because my family chose that last name. That is the name of the slaveholding family that owned us. I know the plantation that we are from in South Carolina, and I am here. My father desegregated a school. He remembers those things. So why do we have to talk about it as if it is past? This is right now. The pain is real. The survivors of racism, we are here, right? And so if you don't have a message around that talks about the future, that talks about the present, you cannot lead this country.
Well, Republicans do have a message around it.
And it's to ignore it. It's to say that we are colorblind, which does not solve the problem.
But it is to say that we are undoubtedly a better and stronger nation on this front today than we were 10, 20, 40, 50, 150, 180 years ago. We are undoubtedly better as an American people than we ever have been, and that will be true again tomorrow.
And I think that was the point. But why is it? It's not because we ignored it. It's because people called out what was uncomfortable, and they challenged the status quo, and they said, we need to live up to what the American dream actually is. Those were the people who were demonized. We just celebrated Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was killed. He was killed. He was not considered a favorite or a darling of America because he stood up against racism, against poverty. And actually, the greatest threat was that he was uniting poor white people, right, with poor people of color. That was the greatest threat to America, was that he was willing to bring us together. So again, we have to move past talking about this as if it is history, as if it's not happening right now. And when the Republican Party does this colorblind thing, you're gaslighting people. And they're going to react to that, and they're going to show it at the polls.
All right, everyone. Welcome to Gaslit Nation. I am your host, Andrea Chalupa, a writer. You know what? I'm a journalist and a filmmaker and the writer and producer of the journalistic thriller, Mr. Jones, the film the Kremlin does not want you to see because it's about Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine, which Putin is continuing today to try to cement his legacy as the next Stalin and live forever in the enslaved minds of the Russian people. So be sure to watch that movie and make your Russian friends too, who escaped abroad and are kind of laying low, to watch it too, okay? Because we need them to wake up. And with me is Olga Lautman, the Lady of Steel. I'm grateful to Olga Lautman. Humanity should be grateful to Olga Lautman because she is fighting the good fight. I know this woman. I know what she does in her off time, and it's what she does when you hear her on the show. She is fighting the Russian mafia through and through. God bless you, Olga. And her opening clip was Natasha Alford, author of American Negra and anchor of The Griot, fact-checking Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley for claiming in a recent GOP debate that America is, in fact, not a racist country and has moved past that into colorblindness or whatever. And Trump's cult is stronger than ever. So we're here to fact check all that. But first, before we get into our big discussion, big announcement. This is hot off the presses. There's going to be a special live taping of Gaslit Nation Monday, February 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern for our Patreon community, featuring Tristan Snell, the lawyer that successfully prosecuted Trump for the Ponzi scheme, or whatever the legal term is, that was Trump University. And Tristan's going to be here talking about his new book, Taking Down Trump, 12 Rules for Prosecuting Donald Trump by Someone Who Did It Successfully. So obviously, we all have a lot of questions for Tristan Snell, the lawyer who successfully went up against Donald Trump. And he has a case here. The book says 12 rules for prosecuting Trump. And I want to know, where is the prison sentence? That's going to be like my first question. And then if you are in our Gaslit Nation community, come ask a question in the chat. I'm very thrilled for this conversation, and I'm excited about Tristan's book. So check it out, pre-order your copy today, and join us at the live taping February 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern. There will be details on how to join that in the show notes for this week's episode. All right, Olga, so there's a lot happening, obviously, in the Trump front because he's still around. He's not in prison. He's still haunting public spaces all over. He was just giving some rally in New Hampshire where he mixed up the names of Nancy Pelosi and Nikki Haley by blaming Nikki Haley for the security failure of January 6th. Never mind that it wasn't just a security failure. It was a full-on violent attempted coup to overthrow our democracy, one that he not just incited, but his entire goon squad from his team of now disbarred lawyers had a war room right next door to the White House in the Willard Hotel, which was up the street from the U.S. Capitol that was being stormed by Trump's mob. And they had this all in operation. They were doing like pre-Stop the Steal rallies with the Proud Boys and Roger Stone and so on. My point is that, just to clarify, I know media is making a big deal of Trump getting Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi confused, but I want to point people to the real story here. What is he getting confused over? Who's at fault for January 6th? Who's at fault for January 6th? The traitor in chief that literally tried to violently overthrow our democracy in a coup that's like the beer hall putsch, what Hitler tried to get away with, right? In the 1920s in Germany. Same energy, same level of horrifying stakes there. And I just want to center everybody in what the real story is with that gaffe. But what Olga and I are about to discuss, which I want to get her thoughts on it, is this. Everyone makes a big deal. Everyone just is memeing out, right? They're going full on Hillary Clinton's emails over Biden and his age. It's just a dead horse meme that everyone's beating. But I want to just point out some things. Ira Rosen, a former 60 Minutes producer, in his book, Ticking Clock Behind the Scenes of 60 Minutes, in that book, he discussed how he had some inside information, how Bannon believed that Trump had dementia, that Bannon was trying to rally Robert Mercer, like the big far-right donor class, get the cabinet officials to come out, pull the trigger on the 25th Amendment because Bannon believed that Trump was mentally unfit, right? Maybe that was Bannon just being bitter because Ivanka and Jared finally pushed him out of the White House. But there's all these, we already know that Trump's unfit, right? Anybody who's listened to this show knows that Trump's unfit. But lately, he's been gaffing it up. He said that Biden's going to lead us into World War II. Sure, we all kind of have typos every now and then when we talk. But then he goes and says that President Biden is President Obama, and so on it goes. Like, we don't need these slurs or whatever. Obviously, he's exhausted. He's running for office. If I were him or anybody running for president, I would be doing the same thing. I do it here on this show, and our tenacious editors just pick it out of the audio, and I sound brilliant, right? So if you've ever been blown away ever, I hope there's at least one episode out there of Gaslight Nation that you're like, wow, that was wonderful. That's the magic's in the editing. Let me just tell you. So I don't blame any public figure, even a Nazi, for slurring their speech or just getting people confused. It happens. We know that Trump's mentally unfit to be president of the United States. I mean, first of all, he's a criminal. He's a serial sexual assaulter, raper, whatever. He's a Russian asset. He's got the golden handcuffs for Chinese dirty money. He's got Viktor Orban's agents all around him trying to get him reelected. I mean, he is a cesspool of crimes that are a threat to not just our country or national security, our very democracy, but their world. But sure, I will explore for a minute here the talk of the week, which is dementias. Is Trump slipping? And, there's that book where a bunch of mental health experts looked at the case of, what was the book? The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. 37 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess a president. All sorts of psychiatrists, all sorts of mental health experts have looked at Trump and come up with their own assessments, because he's notorious for just having no attention span, for repeating the same stories. These are all reports from those who are close around him. And he's just in another world, right? Just like Putin, just like Angela Merkel got off the phone with Putin during the early years of Ukraine's war. And Angela Merkel reported to her close associates that Putin's on another planet. he's just in another reality. Yeah, I agree that someone like Trump, who is surrounded by yes men, who's a mob boss figure, yeah, he's absolutely in his own reality. He's a criminal and he's an adult who's fully responsible for his decades of crime. So question to you, Olga, why does the media beat on about President Biden's age and whether he's too old or not to be president when Trump is clearly unfit to be out in public, certainly anywhere near a school playground?
First of all, the worst part of everything, I have to say, is the media's coverage of Trump. You have them on one hand jumping on every breaking news story. The more horrific and the more criminal it is, whether it's stealing our national security secrets and showing them and handing them to, random people, or, him being involved in the insurrection, or him sitting in the Oval Office and actually excited to see people tearing down and breaking the Capitol. So with that, they break these stories, but at the same time, they treat this as a normal election. They refuse to point out that he's a dictator. And one of the things that my biggest pet peeve is how they continue to talk even now about 2028. So on one hand, they're having a conversation about, do you think he's a dictator? He said he's a dictator. He is putting people in his apparatus that if he does get back in the White House, he will immediately rule like a dictator. But at the same time, they're talking about 2028. Where has a dictator ever gone into power for 4 years? If he gets into power this time, there will be no 2028. The only way power will leave him is if he gives it over to someone in his family or someone, around him. So the media really needs to wake up and understand the dangers as he even goes against them. And as far as whether he has dementia or not, the guy is a sociopath. Dictators are sociopaths. They're not normal. They see the world in a different way. Every single dictator has stories, whether it was Saddam Hussein, who liked to watch executions, whether it's Putin, who gets off on executions, whether it's, other dictators, they have this thirst for violence, for this. They're not normal people. So of course they're going to see the world in a different way. But the media has a very big role to play because they really need to wake people up. You cannot report and have pundits discuss whether he's a dictator or not, and at the same time, hype up the Iowa caucus. For God's sakes, 55,000 people voted for Trump in the Iowa caucus. 55,000. This country is 350 million, and then over 200 million registered voters. 55,000, this is what you're hyping him up as if that's it. So they really need to, take this threat very seriously because they will also pay very quickly. Once Trump gets in this time, look, when he got in 2016, he didn't know anything about government. He didn't understand the bureaucracy involved. We had a lot of people in the government who, were loyal to the Constitution, loyal to democracy, loyal to keeping this country, from falling into an autocracy. And they pretty much were the guardrails. This time around, Trump is already for the past year preparing, how he will go in, which agencies he will go after in order to start weaponizing the government against anyone who is critical of him. So the second time around is way more dangerous, and the same we saw with Hitler. The first time, he got out of power. The second time is when he seized power and stayed in power. I don't know. The media really, again, needs to, get their act together and really warn Americans of the dangers we all face, because this is, whether you're in politics or not in politics, this is going to affect every single American, because there's not one dictator who provides, free, not free. Let me repeat that. There is not one dictator who, follows human rights, who makes sure that society is equal. All dictators, you split societies up. And societies under dictators, you have the majority who falls into even deeper poverty levels. So the media really needs to wake up and start, stop glorifying Trump and start warning Americans of the danger that he poses to us.
Yeah, it's surreal. It feels like a Black Mirror episode, some of this media coverage.
Feels like we're crazy.
That's why we call it Gaslit Nation, because we're fact-checking the gaslighting. But one thing, when you study dictators, when you study the Milgram experiment on obedience to authority figures at Yale University by the psychologist Stanley Milgram, that showed that people would continue to hurt other human beings if an authority figure told them to. And they just obediently, blindly followed authority. And those are the people that allow the dictator to come to power and stay in power. So when the media is out here normalizing Donald Trump and normalizing the fact that this serial corrupt criminal who's been impeached twice, who has all sort of deeply documented dependencies, financial dependencies on some of the worst autocratic regimes in human history, that he's out here the front runner of a major American party, that's the media abusing its power, being the authority here with its power. And you're going to have a lot of Milgram experiment Americans across the country who are going to blindly fall into this as though it's normal. You already see Republican officials goose-stepping already.
One after another. They're lining up.
They're falling in line.
Yeah. Like toy soldiers.
And this Nazi rally is going to gain steam, and it's going to charge ahead, and it's going to get worse and worse, and it's going to incite greater political violence across the country. We just had a far-right march of like a Brooks Brother tiki torch type march. The Klan busted out with their khaki pants and came to New York, and we're marching here just recently, just a few days ago. And so you're going to see a lot more of that, and you're going to see the mainstream media breathlessly following all of it and just legitimizing it, because they did the same thing with Hitler's trial. Journalists morbidly, breathlessly covered Hitler's trial. Now they're doing it with the speeding runaway train of Donald Trump. We're recording this on Monday, January 22nd, on the eve of the New Hampshire primary for the Republican Party. It tells you everything that we're not even bothering to actually wait for the primary itself to record this episode, because we know Nikki Haley, whether she wins or not, it's not going to make a difference. All right? There just wasn't enough Republicans to stop this runaway Trump train. And it just shows you again and again that there are so many people across American society, in major cities, in small towns, in so-called blue states and so-called red states, that have no problem with Trump.
And it's bigger than Trump. Their obsession with Trump is him sending a middle finger to Western institutions, to U.S. institutions. So the more he rails against these institutions, the more these people will be loyal to him, or any figure that goes against the Department of Justice or the Treasury or IRS or whatever department it is that they want to take down. So this is bigger than Trump. This is a tearing down of our institutions, and institutions are the foundations of democracy. Without these institutions, without the courts, without Department of Justice, and knowing that United States has jurors who can put their political beliefs aside and walk into a courtroom and weigh information based on evidence and come to a conclusion. Once you start tainting this, and this is what he has done from 2015, the first thing he did was go after media. Then he went after the FBI. Then he went after the court systems. Trump's popularity only grew after he got indicted. After the first indictment, and when instead of falling in line, and well, not him falling in line, instead of him acting like anyone else who would be indicted, when he said, I'm challenging this, but in an unorthodox way of basically saying F you to the courts, that's when you saw his popularity increase. and him grow in poll numbers. So that's even more dangerous because it's not even just the one person. It's the idea that these people, the more you threaten judges, the more you threaten politicians, the more you threaten law enforcement agents, the more these people get excited and are on board. And that becomes a very dangerous scenario in this country. And this is what dictators look for. They look for these grievances in order to amplify them, in order to tear down the system and cause so much violence and division and hatred and instability in order for them to grab onto power.
In our line of work, in the circles that you and I travel in, right? It's journalists, it's analysts, it's activists, it's all sorts of filmmakers, mostly documentarians, and of course the think tank world inevitably, and all sorts of cultural institutions, right? What I think our field, let's just call it the big tent that we're in, human rights, the world of human rights. What we don't see enough of, you and I meet a lot of lawyers in the work that we do. We meet a lot of analysts. We meet people who are authors of all sorts of chess playing books, like the world's a global chessboard. Or it's those types, right? The stuffy duddies or whatever in their club chairs, drinking their scotch, blowing their cigar smoke in our faces. But what we don't have enough of in our little clubby world is psychologists, right? People that can really say, you want to talk about worldviews and doctrines and Kissinger, we're up against sociopaths. Like, we need to bring in way more mental health experts. And I'm not just talking about the much needed, underpaid, overworked mental health experts treating the generational trauma coming out of the cycles of violence of all sorts of conflict zones around the world. I'm not talking about like humanitarian aid workers. I'm talking about the think tank world should be staffing up these psychologists who can just straight up say, Putin is a psychopath, and here are all the characteristics of it, and so on. And I just want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. So the Harvard psychologist Martha Stout, she wrote a book called The Sociopath Next Door that breaks down how a shocking 4% of regular people, 1 in 25, is a sociopath, meaning that they have no conscience whatsoever, and they just don't have an ability to empathize. That's a shocking statistic. And so I think when we raise our children, for instance, like when we're raising kids in this world, I feel like we need to normalize talking to our kids about the different personality disorders out there and how to spot them so that we can normalize the types of personalities that tend to want to try to become dictators. Because Donald Trump has unleashed normalizing being a toxic personality. That's why you've seen this uptick of all sorts of aggressive, entitled behavior. That's why so many people willingly follow him, because they lack a conscience. It's not hard. It's really that simple. And what I'm saying is that like lofty, ivory tower disciplines like global affairs lacks basic, simple, down-to-earth thinking of cross-pollinating with very experts in human nature. Like, we need more of that in these discussions that we're having to combat this cult of sociopaths that Trump has emboldened. And that needs to be more of the discussion right now, especially leading into the media's feeding frenzy that is going to give greater rise to the second coming of the Trump Armageddon.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing to point out that every single person loyal to Trump is not necessarily a Trump loyalist, if that makes sense. You had a lot of fringe groups in America, up to 2016, whether it was like KKK affiliates or, other white supremacists, the far left groups. You had all these fringe groups. They really never had one person to look up to. They were all fractured across the country. And here, when Trump came, he started kind of bringing these groups. They might be loyal to him, but they're using him as a vehicle for their own agenda of tearing down the government. And that's the scary part. And this is why you've seen so many, fringe groups kind of fall under this umbrella. And you take any rally and you have, representatives of groups that prior to this would have never even communicated with each other. And here they are all together calling for the tearing down of the institutions and the overthrow of government. Whereas before they would, a few of them would talk about it while shooting beer cans in like their yard. That's also another dangerous thing because he has that ability that anyone who is disenfranchised, anyone who doesn't like the American system, who feels that immigrants are taking away from them after being brainwashed of that, and meanwhile, that's the furthest thing from the fact, he's bringing them all together. And that becomes a very big danger because these people aren't even ideologically aligned, except that they want to tear down the system.
Absolutely. Now, I want to get into the story that's picking up speed right now. And I know you and I discussed this prior to recording, and we sort of fall on different sides of it. And I think a lot of people who are biting their nails following the 2024 election in America want to know what to think of this story. So let's just get into it. I'm going to share my view. You come in and you battle axe me to the face and share your view, and then let's go get a beer after, all right? So we're going to obviously talk about Fani Willis, what's going on there. This is how I feel about it. Remember when Trump spent all his time in the Oval Office harassing people, the DOJ and FBI and their families? He went after former Justice Department official Bruce Orr and his wife. He went after former FBI lawyer Lisa Page and former FBI agent Peter Strzok, always trying to harass and humiliate them over their affair. Trump put a giant target on the heads of those tasked with investigating him and his circle of Russian-linked oligarchs. Trump's harassment was obstruction of justice. Now, Trump's goon squad is going after Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney Fani Willis. Sleazebag Michael Roman, one of the 18 co-defendants in Fani Willis's case against Trump and his massive goon squad of election interference deniers, whatever, criminals, traitors. Michael Roman claims in his own frivolous harassment lawsuit that Willis had an affair with one of her prosecutors on the Georgia case, claiming this with, I guess, there's some evidence, there's bank statements, there's trips that Nathan Wade paid for. But there's no confirmation or whatever, but everyone's now talking about it. Ruth Marcus in the Washington Post, who covers legal affairs for the Washington Post with her column, she claimed that there's nothing illegal about any of this, like all these accusations. It's really all noise for the carnival. Obviously, there's a growing cry among ethics, legal experts saying that this prosecutor should just step down, that Fani Willis should have known better, and so on. And I know, like, if you stick your neck out, if you're going to go for the president of the United States, if you're going to take a shot at the Fuhrer, you better not miss. And here, Fani Willis had a sort of big old gray area here with her potential possible boyfriend or not being hired in this very hot trial that was, of course, going to get a lot of scrutiny. When people make mistakes or when people do stuff like this, that's very human, very human. My whole attitude is always, they without sin cast the first stone. There's so many good people across this country that should be serving in public service, that should be out there like a Fani Willis fighting the good fight. And I know there's so many good people that talk themselves out of it because they don't want to face that scrutiny and the price that you pay by being a public figure. And I know the idea is, well, tough, deal with it. It's just that the reality is so many of us are humans and it takes a toll trying to be superhuman. People that have to live up to that role, especially in public, especially when you're going up against a transnational mafia. It's strenuous. It could break you. It could kill you. And you don't have the right to be a messy human. You forfeit that right. And it's hard to be a saint in hell. And that's what this planet is. That's what this dimension we're all stuck in is. I forgive Fani Willis. I think that Michael Roman, who worked as the director of election operations for Trump in 2020 and was organizing all these Trump electors in states won by Biden to try to flip vote, to try to claim that election. He was like pushing the infrastructure of the big lie. I think if Michael Roman and his lawyers were put under the microscope, we would all be throwing up on each other. These guys are as dirty as they come. People that sling mud at you are dirty as hell. Fani Willis, you could say she should have known better. This is such a sensitive case. She had to be above reproach. And every non-white person, every woman knows that they're not allowed to make mistakes, because the minute we slip, the minute we allow ourselves to be messy and human and complex, and we just aren't made of steel, it turns out, or we're tired of being strong, the minute we slip up, our mistakes tend to define us. And we don't get second chances. We don't fail up like white mediocre men. And so, Fani Willis, what were you thinking being a Black woman? You're supposed to be non-human. You're supposed to be steel. You're supposed to be perfect, because they will get you if you're not. So that's my attitude of it. So, Olga, I will kick it to you to decide whether you're going to still come over to my house this weekend.
I will always come to your house. I have a different view. Look, when you serve, become a public servant, you serve the public. You put public interest above everything else. And in this case, we don't know all the details. But from what the details are coming, and again, what Trump's people say, I frankly could care less. I always look at the evidence. And the fact that if, which is a big if, which will be answered, I'm sure, within, at the rate of this breaking news, probably in 48 hours. But if there was an affair prior to, or an ongoing affair prior to her taking the case, and she brought him on, she should have known this would have come out. And she should have put the case first, because the case itself is extremely solid. The case is based on facts, on witness testimonies, so the case itself is not jeopardized as it stands alone as a case. But by unethically bringing in someone that potentially she is having a relationship with, who she is his, supervisor, putting him on to try the case, now we have a very dangerous issue, because this is the one state case that we really, because other cases are federal, obviously everyone knows that any president can issue pardons and it absolves of federal criminal indictments. But state cases, presidents don't have power over. And now we are in a situation that instead of talking about the case and about Trump, basically being tried under the RICO statute with his co-defendants for overthrowing our attempts to overthrow our election, we are talking about an affair. So right away, we are already diverted to discuss an affair. And now, if the, more details come out and she did indeed have an affair, as she appointed Nathan to prosecute this case is now becoming in jeopardy, because now a judge can remove her or remove both of them from the case. And then we are left with the case sitting there all prepared and either looking for new prosecutors to try it, or even worse, it could be taken out of Fulton County to another district where another group of prosecutors will look. And what if it's a more friendly Trump district and they say, you know what, now we don't want to prosecute this. This is something that she should have thought. And I understand we all make mistakes, and I agree with that. But this was something very simple to avoid. You could have easily, I frankly don't even want to know about who she's having relations with. But she could have appointed just another prosecutor. She appointed two others. She could have put someone that there's nothing that can taint the case, nothing that can be used against her in the case, and that's it. Because if the same news came out that she potentially was having an affair with a prosecutor, who's not attached to the case, there wouldn't be any news, period. Like, this wouldn't even be a discussion. It's only the fact that she put him onto the case. And now I worry a lot because that case was a very solid case. And it kills me that she spent so long to put this case together. Interviewing, my goodness, she had hundreds and hundreds of hours of interviews with witnesses and secured some people who, decided to plead guilty and basically turn on Trump and provide testimony. And now all of this is in jeopardy because of this. And I personally feel when you're a public servant, you have to think about serving the public. That has to come first and foremost. And whatever decisions you make, you have to make sure, especially with the biggest case of the century, like you have to make sure everything is properly dotted and T's are crossed and that there's nothing that they can come after you.
Let me ask you a question. What if having this prosecutor, this specific one, by her side made Fani Willis a better prosecutor? What if there was your teammates, your partners make or break you? So what if there was an energy there that they had, a rapport that she needed in order to go up against the dragon? Like, what if Fani Willis was Frodo and this prosecutor was her Sam?
I don't buy that because she's a very strong woman. We've seen how she behaves. She is a very, very strong woman. I don't think she needs to have someone, there holding her hand. I think she's like a bulldozer who can bulldoze through criminal cases. She's prosecuted tons of criminal cases successfully, big cases in Georgia.
But this is one of the biggest legal cases in the entire world.
But it is still a department policy. For the most part, private and public sector, you are not allowed to have relations, especially if you're a superior to someone, because then you have the potential for favoritism, discussions of whether someone received a better salary, if they're getting better work hours. I mean, in any contract, whether you sign with the private sector or the public sector, normally you cannot have a relationship with someone within your department. Coworkers can't, a manager with, their employee can't for these issues because first of all, you don't want, like, the company doesn't want to experience a lawsuit where someone can then, an employee say, oh, you know what, he or she sexually harassed me and I felt that they were my, superior and I felt that this is what I had to do in order to keep my job or to, obviously we know what happens. And again, this is what's upsetting. This is the biggest case of the century. You are prosecuting the former president of the United States.
Transnational mob boss.
Basically, a mob boss and a Russian agent. You are prosecuting him in a RICO case with other defendants to overthrow our election. She should have made better judgment and made sure that there's nothing personal that can come out, because we know enough about Trump, or frankly anyone in his circle or anyone with his personality, that the first thing they do is go and dig dirt.
They go through your trash.
Yeah. Either they issue death threats or they dig dirt and try to find, some kind of compromising material. I mean, this is how Russia captured God knows how many people across the West by finding or obtaining or setting up to get compromising material in order to have it dangled over these people. It's upsetting because I really like her and I really was like, wow, she's a superhero. Like, look, she is building this case. She's putting these hours. I just wish her case went a little bit earlier. Because, with the schedule, it's like, okay, her case eventually might be prosecuted in the summer. But now we are left in this situation. I mean, we're going to have more evidence. But the credit card statements that came out that showed that he paid for trips, whether it's legally allowed or not, we don't know. Because I don't know what the state law is, whether you can use government money to pay for.
We have to be careful because Ruth Marcus, just an hour ago, right before we started recording, in Washington Post, like Ruth Marcus is excellent with her legal analysis. So She said that there's nothing illegal about this. From what we know so far, there's nothing illegal. So every single one of us listening has to be careful because this is a disinformation operation because they're trying to discredit her and this very damning case.
I don't know as much if they're trying to discredit her as it's
absolutely.
a foreign wife who
No,
is...
it's Michael Roman, who's one of the co-defendants, one of 18.
No, I agree with that.
Guess what his day job is? He's a political operative. He's a longtime Republican political operative who digs up dirt on political opponents.
Exactly. And the wife filed a case. So he probably received, some kind of information that Nathan's wife, because she filed the case, I believe, last week.
Yeah, but their marriage was already over. And the wife, oh my God, we're discussing someone's marriage now and we have democracy on the line.
And this is why the Georgia case, this is why, she should have just had better judgment. Because when we talk about the Georgia case, we should be talking about Trump and his freaking criminal goons who try to violently overthrow our democracy and our government, and who sent raging lunatics to break into the Capitol, who said dispatched, his operatives to force people, well, not force, some of them did it with, and with open arms, to create fake electors in order for Pence to, throw out the real electors and keep Trump in office. This is what we should be talking about, not Nathan and his ex-wife's, marriage, when they stopped being married, and that's why I say that Fani should have had better judgment when she appointed the prosecutors. Frankly, I could care less who she has a relationship with. It's none of our business. But for this particular case, she should have, not appointed him. And I think potentially this still can be cleaned up if the facts come out. Again, this is a big if. We have to continue waiting for more evidence. I know the court case was unsealed today, the divorce case. But if everything checks out, there is still time for Nathan to step aside for her to potentially appoint another prosecutor to try to save this case. I care about the case. I don't care about other people's relationships. This is not General Hospital where we have to worry who's doing what. I care about the case, and this was a very solid case that she built. And she really, for years, put together a very solid, good, legally sound case. And for us who have been waiting for accountability, if this, God forbid, falls through because of this,
it's not going to. It's really, the legalities of it are still fine. It's just a disinformation war.
Unless the judge removes her. If the judge forces her to be recused from the case, then the case can potentially go. And no one right now...
Why would she be removed? That's the play they're going for because they're scared of Fani Willis. But in this matter, she could have said, look, I needed him because we have a shorthand. There's a trust there. I knew that he was the right mind for this. And look how far we got together. Everyone's talking about the money he's made. I think he was billing like $250 an hour, which I know what New York and LA prices are. $250 an hour is not bad for a lawyer. And he was racking up I think $600,000 or something like that. That means this man did a lot of shoe leather. He did a lot of work wearing down that shoe leather on this case. So if we're all cheering this case, shouldn't this prosecutor that Fani Willis, in her judgment, appointed get some credit to help lead us this far in this promising case that has yielded some really good things for justice in America? And so I will say that this is very much an operation. Michael Roman is a far-right scumbag. He is a opposition researcher. He goes through people's trash. He's the guy that you hire to dig up dirt on your enemies. And that's what he did here for his own legal benefit. And yeah, he took advantage of a wife, the prosecutor's soon-to-be ex-wife, who sounds like an asshole herself. Because according to the New York Times reporting, this wife cheated on... Yes, Olga, you're going to sit through this General Hospital 101.
No, I heard that that's wife cheated on him. He cheated on her.
Look at us. We're now like Gaslight Nation's now a gossip show. The wife cheated on him with his own friend. Like, what kind of asshole is that? And now she's coming back around to try to really like milk him for all he's worth, really damage him and Fani Willis and maybe American democracy in the process. This woman sounds like she can go to hell too, along with all these other people that we've been talking about.
Well,
this
we
episode.
don't know what their marriage is. I never want to comment on people's marriage because we don't know who did what to whom, when, and what the marriage was. And, you know, I mean, a divorce in itself is not a piece of cake. It's a very difficult thing.
That's very true.
And, you know, you don't know what happened, when it happened, why it happened. You know, the obviously media is going to pick the more salacious details out.
Look, any woman who sides with Michael Roman, opposition researcher, Trump Goon Squad, proud member, like that speaks to your character.
Is the wife siding with him, or is she just filing her divorce? I think she just filed her divorce and the media happened, you know, with Michael Roman to get a whiff of it.
Why else would she in this divorce try to force Fani Willis to testify in her own damn divorce proceeding? And Fani Willis is like, I have nothing to do with your marriage.
No, anybody would, because if you are in a divorce claiming that your husband had an affair, then, and you find, for instance, receipts of, you know, your husband spending money on the other woman, then you would try to bring her in for a deposition in order to find out what is happening. That's for your own court case. And we're not talking about Fani or, you know, him or, but just in general, like if I found out, you know, say my ex-husband is having an affair and I see receipts and, you know, of course I'm going to try to get everything I can out of my ex-husband by, you know, claiming, because one of the grounds for divorce had that, because when you file for divorce, it has to actually be approved through state Supreme Court. And one of the grounds is adultery. So if you prove adultery in your marriage, you know, then you can ask to be compensated for the damages suffered and lost because of the adultery. So, I mean, it's a divorce. It's a divorce case. Divorces are messy. People, you know, sling shit at each other in divorces. And that's it. I don't know enough of the case, why she decided to file now, or if this was in the works that she decided to file, if Mike Roman, you know, found out that she was filing and then decided, oh, wait a minute, there's something there. Let's go dig into it.
This is his skill. This is his trade. He trades in getting compromising information on people.
But that's what you have to expect from them.
Of course, they're authoritarians. That's what authoritarians do. Tim Snyder in his book on tyranny, lessons for overcoming all of this nightmare. Tim Snyder, like right when Trump came to power with the Kremlin's help, Tim wrote this Facebook post that became On Tyranny, a pocket guide for resistance. And one of the things Tim says, and he wrote this in this very heated, nightmarish moment that we all collectively experienced when surprise it was Trump's the winner. Tim wrote, get your affairs in order because they will use anything they can find to hang you. That's what they do.
Absolutely. They threaten you and your family, or they could run it parallel, or they collect evidence to try to undermine you and damage your reputation. I mean, this is what they do. We all would have expected it. And I mean, frankly, if I was prosecuting a case against Trump, I would make sure that there is not one skeleton in my closet in order to make sure that the case is bulletproof, that the case doesn't get undermined in the case something of mine from the past comes out. I have nothing hiding in the past, but the point is, you know, that's where I'm disappointed because I really had hope in the case and I still hope that it's going to go through, but it's just now we're talking about, you know, messy divorce and freaking some kind of a love triangle instead of a serious issue, which is a case that, you know, the former president, in quotes, of the United States used different means to try to violently overthrow our election while at the same time fabricating documents in order to serve them to the vice president to have it certified as the fake electors. I mean, these are very damning charges, unprecedented, obviously, in U.S. We never had anyone who attempted to violently, you know, overthrow and then on top fabricate documents. And that's where the focus should be. And unfortunately, now we're at a point where everything is up in the air. And this is also with same thing now with Jack Smith's case, because in D.C., we're waiting for the appeals court to weigh in, and then it'll go to the Supreme Court. So basically, we have election in November. We have a sociopathic dictator who is out for so much revenge. I mean, that he will be like literally if God forbid he were to win, during transition, he would already be going after people and then we'll pretty much have a roadmap to make sure to take out every single political opponent, every judge, anyone and everyone who has scorned him. And November's right around the corner. I mean, we're in January, November's around the corner, and I don't see one case in sight. And then Trump's Florida judge, who apparently is in his pocket, that case with the classified documents, we don't know when that's going through, which is absolutely outrageous, because I can tell you, if I had one classified document, Andrea, if you had a classified document, one, in your home, by accident, even by accident, you took a folder, you would have Secret Service show up or the FBI and you would be arrested. The fact that this man took out droves of classified material, and then we have a whole classified file missing on Russia's attack on 2016 election that had sources, methods, and everything else, and that the man can't even have a hate code that Trump and his loyalists are preventing a trial from taking place in an orderly manner in Florida. That's insane. Insane. It's beyond insane. And it's very worrying, because now we're in November. We're at a point where we're going to have the most consequential election, and we keep saying it, but unfortunately the next few elections are going to be extremely important and really will direct the future of this country. And the man who's supposed to be held accountable for many different crimes, 91 indictments, and we don't know if we're going to even see him in a courtroom prior to the election. And that's very worrying.
Our discussion continues, and you can get access to that by signing up at the Truth Teller level and higher on Patreon at patreon.com/gaslit. To help civilians caught in the crossfire of the Israel-Hamas war, donate to Doctors Without Borders at doctorswithoutborders.org. We also encourage you to donate to the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian relief organization helping refugees from Ukraine, Syria, Afghanistan, and Gaza. Donate at rescue.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org and check your products for any palm oil and research very easy ways online on how to do that. Gaslit Nation is produced by Andrea Chalupa. Our production manager is Nicholas Torres, and our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. Our episodes are edited by Nicholas Torres, and our Patreon exclusives are edited by Carlin Daigle. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going. Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle. Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smith of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish. Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher: Withrow C. Newell, Lily Wachowski, Kenny Main, Ellen McGirt, Larry Gasson, David Collier, Karen Heisler, Ann Bertino, David East, Ida, Joseph Mara Jr., Julie Matthews, Mark, Matthew Womack, Sean Berg, Kristen Custer, Emmy, Kevin Gannon, Mike Christensen, Sandra Collins, Katie Masuris, James D. Leonard, Leo Chalupa, Carol Golstad, Jason Banky, Marcus J. Trent, Joe Darcy, Ann Marshall, Jeremy Lewis, Trikve, D.L. Singfield, Nicole Spear, Abby Rode, Jans Alstrup Rasmussen, Diana Gallagher, Leah Campbell, Jared Lombardo, and Tanya Chalupa. Thank you all so much for your support of the show. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you.